Scheduled for 6, and we're at about 6. And my name is Terry Gerlach, and I'm going to talk to you this evening about frac sandstone prospects in Waupaca County, and I'm going to approach this on a kind of a township-based assessment. And just give you initially a little bit of background about myself, my education, and my experience. I was raised and educated in Waupaca. Graduated from Waupaca Fremont High School, and I got bachelor and master's degrees in geology, geophysics at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and a PhD from the University of Arizona. I've worked most of my career at Sandia National Labs in geothermal energy research, and then at the USGS in volcano hazards. But what I'm going to talk about tonight was best supported in my experience by work I did as a well driller. My grandfather owned the Waupaca Fremont well drilling, and I worked for him when I was working my way through college, and I drilled wells all over Waupaca County. And I also worked on well cuttings that drillers send in to the Wisconsin Geological Survey as a part-time job when I was a geologist, when I was a student there in Madison. And I've also been involved in exploration for taconite. I worked on the exploration team that developed the taconite ore deposit in Black River Falls back in the 60s. And I've been gone from this area for a little over 50 years, so that gives you some idea how old I am. And I came back here just a year ago, and my interest in geology now is to try to do volunteer kinds of work and just help however I can within the county and within the community here on any geologically related areas that I have enough expertise to make a contribution. And so that's how I got interested in this sandstone, sand mine, frac sand business. When I got back here, when I arrived a year ago, this was just kind of heating up as an issue, and I slowly got involved with it. So let's start by just a couple of basics. What kind of sandstone makes a good frac sandstone? Well, the first thing that they usually tell you is that it's got to be greater than 95% quartz. And here's an example of a frac sand on the right here, and it's compared with a typical kind of sand, which is quite, usually mixed with all kinds of minerals. This one is well over 95% quartz. And quartz is an extremely hard mineral. It's one of the hardest minerals in nature. And it's also takes very high rates of compression stress. And other characteristics that people like to see in a frac sandstone, these are the people, of course, in the fracking industry, the hydrofracking industry and the oil and gas business. They like to see quartz-rich sandstones that are well-rounded, have well-rounded, nicely sorted grains like you see here, because that also adds to their ability to handle high compressive stresses in the formations into which they're injected. And they basically prop open those formations. They're injected under pressure, then the fluid comes back out, and then these grains, the blocks relax back down, and these grains hold the formations open. So, of course, the third thing is that they would like to have these grains to be really coarse. So you want something that's full of quartz, well-rounded grains, and coarse. Now here's a plot of grain size data for the makeup of Wisconsin's sandstones. And I've listed the names of them over here. You don't need to remember this, of course, but the Jordan, Mount St. Hyman, and Woniwoc are the main sandstones that are of interest in frac sand applications. St. Peter is used to some extent, but it is a little bit finer. In this plot here, you can see the average percentage of the various grains in these various sieve sizes here, 2 meters to 2 millimeters to 1/2 millimeter, and then somewhat finer, 1/2 to 1/4, 1/4 to 1/8, and so on. So the Jordans, 40% of the Jordan sandstone is in this coarse category of 2 to 1/2 millimeters. And this is the kind of sand that these people who are involved in the hydrofracking business, this would be the kind of thing they would really like. And then these are these medium ones. They use both of these, medium and coarse, depending on the situation. But these sands here from Wisconsin are very good at providing them with this really coarse stuff that they like. The St. Peter sandstone is a very good sandstone for foundry applications, glass making, things of that sort. But it is finer. You can see it has a greater proportion of the finer, of the medium, the fine, and the very fine compared to these others, which are more favorable and desirable by the frac sand people in the hydrofracking business. Now, just one other point. All of the sandstones that we have here in Waupaca County are Cambrian sandstones, and they're Jordan, Mount Simon, and Wonnewook sandstones. We don't really have any St. Peter sandstone here, but it is just east of us in Outagamie County. You can find it there. So I will go next to tell you what data that I'm using to evaluate the availability of frac sand in the Waupaca County. There are bedrock maps produced by the Wisconsin Geological Survey, and you can get some information from those geologic maps as to what's available here in Waupaca County, but all of those maps are out of date. The latest and most recent date on any of those maps is 1982. That's 31 years ago, and there's been an awful lot learned since then. But that information has not yet been put into a new bedrock map. And so another problem is that if you try to find sandstones to examine on the surface in Waupaca County, there aren't very many places where you can go and find it. You can find it, of course, over in Caledonia, where they're actually mining sandstones. You can find some outcrops of sandstone over there, and you can also find some in Union, in the town of Union, on top of Tellox Hill. We recently have discovered sandstones up there that the Wisconsin Geological Survey didn't even know was there. But that's about all you have to go on. So what I decided to do after spending some time, a couple of months, looking around at what's out there in the field and what's out there in old maps and so on and so forth, was to make use of a DNR database that began to be produced in 1987, and it's run up to the present. And this is a database of water well construction reports. And there are thousands of these water well construction reports in this database since 1987, so that's like 26 years worth of data during a period when a lot of wells have been drilled in Wisconsin, including Waupaca County. And in that data, the DNR requires the well drillers to report lots of basic technical data. How big is the well? How deep is the well? What kind of casing did you use? Is there a filter on it somewhere? All that sort of thing. But also, they've asked the drillers to provide a description of the rocks that they drilled through. And the rocks that they drill through here in Waupaca County are pretty simple. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to identify what they are. There's just basically granite and sandstone and occasionally some limestone, very occasionally, and even less frequently some shale. And then, of course, there's a lot of just plain gravel and sand on top, unconsolidated stuff. So this is a pretty good source of accurate data, and there's an awful lot of it, and it provides me with data from all over the county, not just a few scattered locations. So I have made use of that, and I'm giving an example here of a well. Each one of these wells in the database has a unique number, and this is just an example here. If somebody wants to get into this later, we can, with this computer here, I can show you exactly how to go right to this site and how to access what's available there. But in this case, this is a well from Bear Creek. It's from Tellock Hill. Tellock Hill has been in the news a lot because of that's where the sand mine is under consideration here in Waupaca County. And that, that Telux Hill sits right on the border. It sits right on the boundary between Union Township and Bear Creek Township. It's about half of it on the west side and the other half on the east side in Bear Creek. Well, this is the well that's just barely on the Bear Creek side. Belongs to a gentleman named David Flanagan. And this well goes down through about 66 feet of just clay and stones, not an unusual sort of start for a well here in Wisconsin. And then at 66 feet, it hits sandstone, and it goes to 198 feet. And at 198 feet, it hits granite, and then they went as far as 225 feet and quit. So I can get a lot of information out of this. It's quite useful. First of all, I know there's sandstone here. So I know that that site, and that we have, you know, they give the complete location for this well. So I know that at that site, sandstone is present. I know that it starts at 66 feet under the ground, so I know how deep it is to it. And then from this data, knowing where it goes into granite, I can get an estimate of how thick it is. So I can get the fact that, you know, whether or not there is sandstone, I can determine whether or not it's shallow, deep, or whatever. I can get the depth, and I can get an estimate of the thickness. Now, not every well, in a lot of cases, when a well is drilled, if they get into sandstone, they get a really good water supply in sandstone as a rule. So there's not always any reason to drill all the way through the sandstone and to enter into the granites below that. So this is kind of a special situation. There are about 40 or 50 wells like this one in Waupaca County, scattered around through Waupaca County, that go all the way through the sandstone and into the granite. Those give me my best thickness estimates. Otherwise, my estimates are minimum estimates, and I'll say more about that later. Minimum estimates for thickness. Okay, here's what I got from all the data in that database. Here's what I've got to work with for Waupaca County. Of course, I went through, you know, everything that was there. There's some tests I can do to check out, make sure that there aren't errors in the data, and did all that sort of vetting. And I ended up with this whole set of wells, then 6,309 that I was satisfied with. And that's my sample then for all of Waupaca County. And out of that, there are 4,846 which are in unconsolidated rock. That's loose rock. What geologists call unconsolidated rock, it is what the rest of us call sand and gravel mainly. In Waupaca County, loose rock or unconsolidated rock is primarily sand and gravel. It's the first thing you drill into. It's the soil and the sands and gravels and the cobbles and the boulders, and it's all, but at the point, the thing that defines it is that it's just a bunch of discrete particles. It's not a solid continuous piece of rock. It's not a coherent piece of rock. The bedrock underneath it is coherent and solid. This is actually, you know, something that you got to break with a hammer. This stuff here is like basically drilling through a pile of marbles and grains and so on. So I'm interested in these 1,463 bedrock wells that get into bedrock, because the bedrock is where I'm going to find things like sandstone, if there is any. And I've indicated here the rock types that comprise these bedrock wells, these 1463 bedrock wells. Of those 1463 wells, there are 71 that transect limestone. Not very much, but I'm just mentioning it. And it usually is on top of the granite. There are 624 that transect sandstone. Excuse me, they're usually on the sandstone, and then the sandstone is usually on the granite. There's 870 wells that transect granite. Now, any given rock that gets into bedrock can transect limestone, sandstone, and granite. And so you would count it here, and count it here, and count it here. The usual thing is we don't have sandstone, we just have, or excuse me, we don't have limestone, we just have sandstone and granite. And so usually we're just dealing with rock, with wells that are in these categories here. That is wells that transect sandstone and wells that transect granite, and there are some wells that can transect both. So when you add up these numbers here, it doesn't total to this, it totals to 1,565, and that's because some of these wells transect more than just one rock type. I hope that's clear. And so we start a well at the surface, we go through this loose rock, and if we go into bedrock, then we get into these things here, and at the bottom is always the granite. The sandstone is always on the granite, and in places it's between the limestone and the granite, and this limestone that it gets into in Caledonia mostly is well dated, and these granites are well dated, and we know that any of these sandstones in between here are therefore have to be Cambrian. Those are the only kind of sandstones that you're going to find between these limestones and granites here that we have in Waupaca County. The other thing I want to point out is that there's a distinction to be made between pit sands pit sands and sand mine sands or frac sands. Frac sands and sand mines, they're developed in this stuff. They're developed in the sandstone. But these sand pits are always developed in this loose rock, this stuff near the surface. I want to make that clear. What I'm talking about is sand mine stuff or sandstone stuff. It's not the same thing that you see in your local gravel quarry or sand quarry where you go and get sand and gravel. That's from the surface. All right, so what I did then is I took this set of data here, mainly all this bedrock data, and I worked out, sorted out all the sandstones in them, and then I classified them by a simple system as terms that just was to indicate whether they have lots of sandstone, whether the township really has lots of sandstone, or does the township have very little sandstone. So I'll start off with what I call the have-lots. The have-lots towns are the towns that have lots of sandstone, lots of wells that transect sandstone rocks. And here's Caledonia. There's a total of 286 bedrock wells, and 283 of those transect sandstone. That's 99%. That's fantastic. It's hard not to find sandstone in Caledonia when you drill into the bedrock. Fremont, 125 sandstone transecting wells out of a total of 139 that get into the bedrock. That's 90%. That's not bad either. Muckwa, 96 out of 154. That's 62%. And then here's Waupaca. Waupaca, it's a smaller number, but the percentage is really impressive. There's of the 49 bedrock wells, 40 of them transect sandstone. That's 82%. So little old Waupaca has got a chance to play in this game too, in terms of frac sands. Okay, now I'm going to go down to my other classes in as they decrease. So the next group down is what I call the have-gots. They've got a lot of sandstone, but they don't necessarily have a whole lot of it, but they have significant amounts. So Royalton, 29 sandstone transecting wells out of a total of 76. That's 38%. Dayton is, I'll come back to that. It's kind of an unusual one. Most of these, though, like Royalton, Lebanon, and Lynn, most of these run around 30 to 40% with sandstone transecting bedrocks. Now, Dayton has got 18 out of 22. That's 82%. That really looks impressive. But this is not many bedrock wells, and nor is that. So these two data sets for Dayton and Lynn are enticing, they are interesting, but they might not really be a good sample for the whole township because there just aren't enough wells. I'll talk a little bit about that more and point out some things related to that later. So these are the have-gots. And then we go down to the wildcats. These are the have-spots. These are the towns that have sandstone transecting wells hidden away here and there in different places in the town. Not all that many of them, and you'll be interested to know, I'm sure, that Union is one of these, and the three that are here, they're all in Tellox Hill. Every one of them. And the other three, and three of the four here in Bear Creek, are in the eastern extension of Tellox Hill into Bear Creek. So this database does pick it up, even when it's not all that prevalent. There's another one, there's another well that gets into sandstone at a different place in Bear Creek, and I'll show that to you later. There's a couple in Farmington. There's only one up in Madison. There's three in Little Wolf, and they're kind of interesting. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. And then finally, we get down to those that are have-nots. And there they are. And these are the townships that have bedrock, of course, but they don't have any sandstone transecting wells. And of course, what their wells are transecting is granite. These are all the granite. These tend to be to the north and west. Well, you know these towns here, you know where they are, and I'm going to show them to you on a map here pretty quick. But these are the have-nots. And I gave this talk a couple of weeks ago at Scandinavia to their county or to their town board, and they were not too terribly disappointed by this result. They were pretty. They weren't clapping, but they were, you know, clearly they were not upset at not having any. So, anyway, now what I want to do is use this county map. This is a county map that shows topography of the townships throughout Waupaca County and shows all the townships. And I'm going to just project some of that data now onto these township squares so that you can get a better feel geographically for where the have-lots, have-gots, and have whatever are. Okay, so we'll start with, well, first of all, I'm actually going to show you where all the wells are. That's where all 6,309 wells are. This is something that just might be of interest to you. And there are lots of wells in Farmington and Dayton. And they are, it's just enormous. There's about 800 in each one of those. And there's quite a few in Muckwa. Now, in Wyoming and Waupaca, there's roughly only about 100 wells. So there's not quite so many in those places. But on the whole, it's a pretty good, you get a pretty good representation of the subsurface for all the townships. Now I'll show you where all the bedrock wells are. They're going to come up next. Here are the 1,463 bedrock wells. Now look at Dayton, 797, only 22 bedrock wells. So, you know, in Dayton, they get so much water out of their sand and gravel, the loose rock on the surface, that they don't need to be drilling wells into the bedrock. That's the reason there's such a difference here. And so that's why I'm not looking on this as being a very good sample of what the bedrock sandstone potential is for Dayton. And same over here in Lynn. Lynn gets, these are a lot, this is a lot of wells too, but they're practically all in the unconsolidated part. Now it's interesting, you get over here into Caledonia, a total of 309 wells, and 286 of them are bedrock wells, and I just told you that 99% of these bedrock wells are in sandstone. So you see that in Caledonia, the sandstone wells are almost, well, they actually outnumber the wells that just go into the loose rock or the unconsolidated rock. So in Caledonia, you're just basically always in sandstone. It's really interesting. Fremont, that's a significant fraction of the total. Waupaca, this is why I rate Waupaca partly in the category of have-lots, because about half the wells, even though they don't have a lot, they have 100 in here, and half the wells are in sandstone, or bedrock. Okay, so Now I'm going to take a look at the bedrock wells in relation to the sandstones, the wells that transect sandstone, and I'm going to put in the have-lots and the have-gots and the have-spots and the have-nots. So I'm just going to, as I click on them here, they're going to come in. So if we start with the have-lots, and here they come, and there they are in orange. So 283 out of 286, 125 out of 139, that's 99% to 90%. Here's Waupaca with 82%, and here's Muckwa with 62%. Pretty impressive. Going now to the have-gots, 12% out of 39, and 12 wells out of 39 in Lebanon, 29 out of 76 in Royalton, that's 38%, 76 bedrock, 29 sandstone transecting, and then here are the data for Dayton and Lind as well for the sandstone. Dayton really has 82%, just like Waupaca, but I didn't put it in this category of have-lots because I just think this is not enough wells to be a really good sample for the whole township. But it is intriguing. It suggests that maybe there is a lot of sandstone in Dayton. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case. And but for now, I'm just going to leave this in the have-gots category. Royalton is kind of, that's my average town. If I calculate an average township for the whole, from the whole database, just an average township, it looks very much like Royalton. So I use Royalton as my average town because it's a real thing, whereas the calculated average is just some sort of abstraction. Okay, now the ones that are spotty. Notice that we're moving sort of from the southeast corner to the northwest, and that trend continues when you look at the ones have spots. Here are the have spots ones. Madsen has 1 out of 20, Bear Creek 4 out of 44, Union 3 out of 55, Little Wolf 3 out of 49, St. Lawrence 2 out of 36, and Farmington 2 out of 69. But some of these are very interesting, as we'll see in a bit, even though it's getting sparse. And so you can tell where the have-nots are going to be. And when I put the zeros up there, unfortunately, the color that I use looked good on my computer screen, but it doesn't help much here. But anyway, it's all up here in the north and in the west. So we have this transition. And this is seen across a lot of counties in this range that we're at here in the state of Wisconsin. And basically what this reflects is this reflects about 250 million years of erosion that has gone on since these sediments, like the sandstones, the limestones, and all that sort of thing, were deposited on the granite. And they show this pattern of eroding away and exposing this emerging dome of what's called the Wisconsin Dome. And so it's this pattern that we see here is just simply related to a process of erosion. It doesn't really have anything to do with, well, the sandstone was deposited here, but it didn't deposit much up there. What I'm saying is that this whole thing was covered by sandstone at one time, and that in turn was covered by limestones and shales and more sandstones and so on. And the whole thing's been eroded back, and this is what you're left with. And you end up with a fair amount of sandstone yet in this part of the county, then decreasing as you go north and west. And then if you live in the north and west, then what you deal with is granite when you start drilling wells. And that's not always so great. But anyway, that's the situation on the distributions. So here's our sandstone transecting bedrock, and I've pulled out all just the total bedrock numbers, but these are the sandstone transecting wells. Here they all are, and you can check this out one last time. I want to make one point here that is kind of interesting. Somehow, you know, the average township is about 36 square miles, and all of these are like that, except down here, Waupaca, Caledonia, and Fremont. For some reason, they took two normal townships and made 3 out of it. And I don't know why that is. I bet some of you do, and if you tell me afterwards, I'd kind of like to know the reason for that, why that happened that way. Some of you probably know. But because of that, Waupaca, Caledonia, and Fremont, even though they are real leaders in the sandstone transecting bedrock well business, they are actually playing this game here with a handicap, because their areas are smaller than the areas of these other townships. And if you correct for Waupaca has, instead of 36 square miles, it's got about 24. Caledonia has 28 instead of 36. Fremont's only got 20. And so you can correct these numbers. It's legitimate to correct these numbers using an appropriate ratio from these these variations between what it should have as an area and what it actually has. So the ratio turns out to be about 1.3. You can multiply this number by 1.3 for Caledonia, and you get something like 364. You can multiply this one for Fremont by almost a factor of 2. It's actually 1.8. This goes up to 225, and the Waupaca number goes up to 60. So if it would be legitimate to do that. Now, I didn't do that because I want to stick close to the data, but it's an impressive, it makes this glut of sandstone down here even more impressive, really. All right. Let's see, what is going to be next year? Okay, so we know now more or less where we've got sandstone and where the sandstone is on the surface. We've got kind of a picture. We've got kind of know laterally and geographically where it is. But what if the sandstone is 900 feet deep? Then what? Is that any good? Even if there's lots of sandstone, but you got to go 900 feet for it? The point is that it's important to know how deep it is to the sandstone also, and I can get that information out of this database. And what this plot shows is this shows the number of wells that get to sandstone less than 100 feet deep. So you can get to 200, and there's 231 wells out of the 283 here in Caledonia that hit sandstone at less than 100 feet. Now, people that make sand mines, they like to have the sand at or near the surface. So I'm using 100 feet, and I'm going to go shallower, but these would really be much more appealing, to a sand mine owner or a sand mine developer than some of these numbers up here. So again, the southeast is very impressive compared to the rest. This is pretty good. They're doing pretty well here. There's some numbers there that are not too bad. But once again, it's this area that really looks like this sandstone potential is great there. Okay, what about 50 feet? How many bedrock wells do you have in a township that reach sandstone at less than 50 feet? In Caledonia, there's 81 of them. 81 of them within 50 feet. It's only 2 in Fremont. It's curious. Fremont has sandstone, but on average, if you calculate the average depth to sandstone for all these townships that have sandstone, it's deeper in Fremont than anywhere else. It's about 137, 138 feet to Fremont. Here in Caledonia, so there's not too many wells that have it at less than 50. There's 9 in Waupaca. So this almost makes Waupaca now look better in Fremont as a prospect, because it's got 9 wells that are at less than 50 feet. Lebanon has 2. There's 1 well that's at less than 50 feet in Little Wolf. And I might as well start pointing out where some of these are. That well is right in this area right here. This well here, or these wells here there's 1 up here and there's 1 down here. The Mucka ones are spread around quite a bit, and so are these. All of the Waupaca stuff is in here. Most of the Caledonia stuff is in these bluffs here. Anyway, we'll come back to that. The next one shows an even more interesting one, and that is, what is the shallowest sandstone depth in feet? What are the shallowest sandstone depths in feet that I find for these townships? Well, look at this one, 4 feet. That's up in Lebanon, it's right there. 19 feet in Muckwa, that's right here. 7 feet in Caledonia, and you know where it is? It's right there. 47 feet in Fremont, and I really have to say, I don't know, I've forgotten where it is. Waupaca's 33 feet to the, that's their shallowest, and that is right there. And then there are these others here as well. And you notice that the really shallow depths tend to be over here on the east and the south. It's the east and the south. As you start going further west and north, and things start getting deeper again. So that trend just shows up in a number of ways. So anyway, we can use this database to sort out which are the most likely prospects on the basis just of depth of drilling, and they kind of support the picture we had just from looking geographically at which townships have and do not have sandstone. Now thickness, this is the last thing here to think about. The thickness is difficult, as I said, because when people are drilling a well, if they get into sandstone, they usually always get a good well there, and there's no reason for them to drill through the whole thing necessarily. So a lot of the wells that are in sandstone don't, even though they put in the database the final depth of that well, that doesn't necessarily mean that is the bottom of the sandstone at that spot. So what I've done is gone through the data, and I've pulled out just the maximum numbers for depth that I can find, because I think they'll be the closest to the truth. And so here are the thicknesses in feet that I see. And this 164 right here is again from this shallow place right here. That property in there is owned by Randy Steingraber. And I wonder how many mining people have already talked to him. Anyway, 151 at Muckwa, 187 in Caledonia. That's based on drilling in these bluffs where there's limestone, which protects the sandstone. And so they get the highest thicknesses through here. Of course, the sandstone is everywhere in Caledonia, so to speak. So if you drill down in these areas, these lower areas, it is less thick. It's more like 130 to 150. 150 here, 132. These are all really good thicknesses. Based on what I've seen of what people look for in sand mines, these are pretty good. I'd say, these are, again, most of these are going to be minimum numbers, but I'd say that on the whole, the sandstones here in Waupaca County that would be of interest to people probably are going to run thicknesses of 150 to maybe even over 200 feet. Okay. So there's a summary of all this. It seems to basically be supported by, first of all, the occurrence of the sandstone and the depth to it and the thicknesses. And so if some of you are writing down notes and trying to, figure out where to go buy property or whatever, you might want to I'll just give you a little time to get that down if that's of interest to you. And if you think that I've got this all figured out and that I know exactly what to do, well, maybe not, because I firmly believe that there's going to be surprises, because there is, I'm using a technique here that depends on water wells, and it's good. It gives me a lot more information than I can get out of any geologic maps from the past, from 1982, for example, or old papers and that sort of thing. But it has a weakness, and the weakness is that water wells are drilled where people are and where they live. And take an example here. Here's Tellox Hill. This is Tellox Hill right here. Now we know we've got sandstone there, and there's wells that go into it. There's 3 of them from Union, and there's 3 more over here on the Bear Creek side. That's great. But Cy Simmons and I have looked over this whole area and also this whole area, and all of my geologic alarms go off when I go, to here, to here, to here, to here, and these hills here and here. And I see things that really strongly suggest to me that all of these hills probably have sandstone under them. But in my database, there are no wells on these hills because they're kind of remote areas. Or if there are a few on them, they're all very shallow. They don't go down to bedrock, so they don't help me any. So that's the Achilles heel of my method, is I don't think it's much of a problem, down in this area here. But I surely believe it's a problem in Union and Bear Creek. It might be a problem over here in St. Lawrence. The two wells at St. Lawrence are right here in Poverty Hill. But they're pretty skimpy. They don't have much thickness. They're very deep. But where I'm concerned about this most of all is here in Farmington. We don't have much well data, and there's two. There's one here, and there's one over here, and there probably is a lot of sandstone in southern Farmington. I wouldn't be surprised, but because it don't have a lot of wells in these areas, that don't see it. And Dayton, in particular, the Dayton wells are right around here and right up in here. They're right around New Hope with all of its other interesting problems. And there's probably a lot of other places, like here in Lynn. The Lynn wells are all just kind of scattered around helter-skelter. There's a few here, there's one here, there's a couple up here. There aren't very many. But there might be some down in here, but they just don't have any wells. And up in here, I don't really have wells that get deep enough into this part of southern Waupaca Township either. So anyway, that's the problem what I have. So I want to make it clear that I am not going to assume that what I have here is the last word. There are going to be surprises. The surprises won't be so much that things that I've told you are not true. The surprises are more likely to be that, hey, they find sandstone in this place, and Gerlach never said anything about that. He never said anything about there being any sandstone up here or over here or wherever. I expect that there will be some cases of that if sand mining really becomes a very active area of business here in Wisconsin. Well, okay, so now I've told you that I'm not really fallible, that I am fallible, and I've told you that I may have some mistakes in all of this, but after that, I think I have a right to do some geo speculation, and this is basically the last technical slide. Here's all the town-ranked have-lots through have-nots sandstone transecting wells. And what I'm going to try to do now is connect them up a little bit with some features. And the features are going to come in here now. And of course, the 3 wells in Union and the 4 wells over here in Bear Creek are connected mainly to Tellox Hill. The 4th one from Bear Creek is a little hill over here, which Highway 22 goes right through it. And there's one over here in Matson that's just kind of off by itself and don't have anything really to connect it to. The 3 in Little Wolf are right in this area right here. There's a hill here, and there's some right in here. I keep thinking when I go over there that there should be some here, and I would think there should be some in here. This is an impressive feature when you drive over it. But the data that I have, there's another set of data here that I haven't really talked about. The granite holes, I find these areas are full of granite. That's another thing I can do with this database. If I don't find sandstone where I think it should be, I can check and see, well, maybe this hill is held up by granite. Maybe this is a granite bedrock. And indeed, that seems to be the case here and here. In Lebanon, we got 12, and 11 of them are in this area right here, this high area right here. And so I connect that up with the things in Little Wolf and draw a circle around it. I feel pretty confident about that. And this really interesting well over here that hits sandstone at like 4 feet and then goes down for, what was it, 160 some feet thickness. That is part of this feature here, so I'm just going to dot that in and make that part of it. Over at St. Lawrence, we've got 2 little places Not really super duper, I don't think, but there they are. In Poverty Hill, there's the two in Farmington, there and there. Royalton, extremely interesting. 29 wells, they're all in here. They're just beautifully constrained by this hill. And in these areas, by the way, as we get away from these kind of remote areas and come down here, you know, people live in these, and farm on these, right on these hills, and they have some wells. And here in Royalton, there's homes, there's farms, there's whatnot, and there's all kinds of people living along White Lake here on the south side of it. There's all kinds of, there's really a lot of wells in here. This is really well located. And this might be an area of some interest because this thing kind of sticks up. You know, you don't have to go super deep to get at it. Same thing here in Waupaca. This is basically where all the 40 wells are from Waupaca that go into Sandstone. They're in here. And there's 3 hills. There's this one that part of Waupaca is built, or in part holds up Waupaca. And there's a kind of another one here and then another one here. That seems to be the source of the sandstone mainly. And in, as I said, in Dayton, there's some few in here. And there's actually quite a few here on a building development. But I really think one needs to do that. You know, it's really hard to say anything more about Dayton than just the fact that, well, it looks interesting. Here are the ones for Lind. There's one in here. There's one here, one here, one here, and there's 2 here when it overlaps with Fremont. Fremont stuff is all pretty much in here, as I said. Not a whole lot out here, but in here. And then finally, Muckwa. There's a little bit over here on the north side of the Little Wolf. And then over here, there's a lot in this bluff here. There's a lot of them in here. There's all kinds of, look like maybe summer cottages and homes in here. There's a lot of stuff here. There's actually a lot of stuff through here and then around and this thing here. And then this thing is where, you know, they're here. Here now they're actually mining sandstone out of a quarry here. The old Black Creek limestone quarry has been around, well, not quite 100 years. And then Fox Brothers has a quarry here. I don't know if they're doing sandstone or not, but they're probably clearing out the limestone so that they can. There's another quarry down here. I'm sorry, I don't remember the name of it. There's also a quarry over there. There's quarries all over the place here. And this is also where the only sandstone processing plant for processing frac stone exists in Waupaca County. It's located right in this area here. And there's a railroad track that comes down through here, through Waupaca, Waupaca, and right into that. And boy, I tell you, this is the catbird seat for sandstone mining in Waupaca County, if there ever was one. And that was just recently sold by, I think it was called FTS Proppant Specialists. They sold it to Fairmont Mining, which does much of the sandstone processing in the western Wisconsin, for $15 million. It happened just about a week ago or so, a couple of weeks ago. Anyway, so those are my kind of speculations, and I would like, if any of you are from townships, I would really enjoy the opportunity to sit down with you and go through the townships that look like they're of interest in detail. I can give you the data section by section. I can break it all the way down to quarter section for you, and really show you where these wells are. But that isn't what I wanted to do here tonight. That pretty well takes care of it for me. There's my contact information. If you want to, if you have any questions about this, if you want to look at the data, I'm willing to, show it to you, of course. If you want me to come and talk to your people on your town board or whatever, I'm quite willing to do that. And of course, I don't charge. This is just a volunteer thing for me. And I'd like to acknowledge Preserve Waupaca County members who helped organize this talk tonight in terms of doing all the administrative and various duties that have to be done in order to get something like this off the ground. The library, the DNR for their wonderful database, and then Jason McKeefery, he's in the Waupaca Land Information Office. He helped me a lot with some of the graphics. Cy Simmons for helping me in the field. It was the field work that we did here that led me to believe that I really needed to do more than field work, and that's what got me into looking at these databases for water wells. And then I have old colleagues from the past. Tom Emmons is Associate Director of the Wisconsin Geological Survey, and Roger Peters, he's now an emeritus geologist with the Wisconsin Geological Survey. And I occasionally go down and go through stuff with them that I'm doing and bounce ideas off them, and that's always a source of a lot of thought and good input for me. So, you know, they've had some input into this also. And that, I believe, oh, the most important people of all. Without the drillers, none of this would be possible. I couldn't tell you anything more than those old 1982 geologic maps. Because these are the people that produced that data and reported it religiously, and I think really did a really excellent job. I had no trouble. I'd never found one single well report where I thought, what in the heck is this guy talking about? It was always very clear. So thank you very much, and I will take any questions that you have after that. All right, let's just start here.
Well, I'm just wondering with the counties on the western part of the state where it's quite a bit more active, how our saturation level, I mean, are they just flush with sandstone to a hugely greater degree than we are? Or?
I think so, yeah, they do. Yeah, they start off with a lot more than we have. I think that's pretty clear. Yes?
The prospective mines at Simcoe in Union Township, how
Yeah.
close was that sandstone to the surface? Caused them such interest?
Let's see. 1 second, I have that data here.
And also, I guess, how thick is it and how extensive is it, west, east, north, south?
Yeah.
I mean, why was it of such interest, I guess, is the question.
Okay, I'm coming up with 74 feet to the depth of it on the Union side, and 66 on the Bear Creek side. That's the depth. Now, what was your other question?
Well, I mean, how deep is the sandstone? I mean, is it 100? You said you'd like to have 150 feet.
Well, I don't know for sure if that's a good number, but yeah, it strikes me that if you did that, 150 feet looks pretty good to me. So how thick?
Are these thick?
Yeah. Here,
I extensive north to south, east to west?
Oh, they're extensive east-west.
Okay.
Let me just show you there's the thicknesses. 106 here and 132 here, and these are minimum thicknesses. Yeah. These are minimum thicknesses, and they are extensive in an east-west sense because they basically are east to west across this hill feature here. Yes.
I'm confused because I keep hearing that we're only mining this sand because it's like for foundries, and I'm hearing you talk frac sand.
Well, I'm talking about frac sand here.
That's the truth.
Oh, I'm talking about frac sand here.
Right.
But these, and the plan that the company involved here in Union at Tellox Hill, I think that's what you're talking about. Their plan is to use it for foundry sand, and they can do that. They can do that. But I'm giving you could also use it for, it could, yeah, yes, it could be used for frac sand. I can, give you a little bit here. This is the sand. The people that I deal with down in Madison at the State Geological Survey, they've looked at, you know, stuff I've brought them, and they've worked with data that they have, some mapping projects that they have going on in Outagamie County, and they have come up with a projection of what the sandstone is at Union. And they firmly believe that what it is the Wuniwuk sandstone. Okay? All right, look at the Wuniwuk here. The Wuniwuk is the dark brown one. And you see, it has a significant fine and very fine component compared to the Jordan and Mount Simon. They don't have quite as much fine. But it also has a significant medium size component, and it has some significant coarse. So the Wuniwuk is a sandstone that's got a little bit of everything, and that's what is there. Now, a foundry, ideally, the ideal foundry sand usually is considered to be the St. Peter, because it's very rich in the fine and the medium and the very fine, and it doesn't have much of this stuff, this coarse stuff at all. So if at Union you had the Wuniwuk, but if you just took out this coarse part, what you'd be left with would be something that would be really excellent for, I would assume, would be perfectly acceptable for foundry sand. And so that's, okay? Yeah, yes?
That connection you just started to make was the question I had. We've got all these deposits in the various areas, but is there any indication of the quality of that sand and what its potential uses might be? I doubt they probably got that from the well drilling information.
Well, all of this...
About 95% quartz and uniformity of size.
Well, that's a question that would come up no matter where you got your sandstone, even over in the west from, you know, where the really supposed good stuff is. But all of these sandstones have to be washed, and in order to get that quartz purity up to 95%. Now, if you start off with a raw sandstone that's 95% quartz, even that they'll wash that, and then they do sieving in order to build up the coarse fraction or make a sand, you know, that they want to sell that's got the properties that they want. So all of the sands that we're talking about here in Waupaca County are, I think, all of the sandstones, all of these three right here. These are what they use in the West. They're the same thing they use in western Wisconsin. And they can manufacture from that, they can by washing and by sieving, they can get the quality of sands that they would need for frac sand. And it's in very high demand. It's one of the Wisconsin sand, white frac sand is probably the cream of the frac sand industry. That is it. But they can easily build up. All of these wells start with very excellent sandstone, and you can see it in the drillers' descriptions. You know, they talk about that. The fact that it's, you know, very white and it's very clean and it's full of quartz and so on. Yes.
Do you have in that database? Are there any examples of mining companies themselves and their test drillings throughout the?
No, there is not. My database is entirely water wells. These are just, you know, ordinary water wells of private citizens, farmers, and things like that. It's entirely water wells. I don't have any high-capacity wells. I certainly don't have any. You know, mining companies, when they drill wells, that's proprietary information. That data is never going to end up in a publicly accessible database. Unless they give it to them, but you know, it's never heard of that. Yes.
The mining company has claimed that this is St. Peter sandstone here in Union. What do you see the likelihood of that?
Well, the people, I was just saying, the Wisconsin Geological Survey people don't buy that at all. They say it is, their best estimate is that it's the Wuniwuk sandstone. That's what they think it is. And I've taken them samples of it, and they've found it very interesting. But that's what they come up with as you know. I've taken samples of the Wuniwuk from you know, Denison's building supply. You can get right to outcrops of the sandstone there, and also I've gotten some on top of Tellox Hill from Clyde Tellox land back there. I've gotten samples there, and then I've taken it into these people, and they feel quite comfortable with calling it Waupaca sandstone. Yeah. Other questions? Yes.
You just mentioned high-capacity wells. Is there information out there about the water table that is accessible online for somebody who wanted to look? Because, as I understand it, these mining operations do draw a lot of water.
Mm-hmm.
So what are we looking at in the way of the water resource that's available at that site?
I couldn't tell you. I have been busy just doing this,
doing
just
it.
following the sandstone. I started this in like April, and it's been up until, you know, like just this afternoon before I really finished and ready to put this talk together, do this talk. I mean, I was changing things, but the thing is, it's a big job because, you know, it's boring. Like all research, you know, I was told once that the most important letters in the word research are R-E, repeat, refine, rethink, redo, you know, on and on and on. It's a retrofitting, you know, you're just constantly iterating, and doing very monotonous things, trying to zero in and get a better and better answer. But it's hard work, and it takes a lot of time. So I haven't had a chance to look at groundwater data, but to answer your question better, there is that data, I'm sure, is available and probably on DNR's site somewhere. Yeah. Yes?
In response to her question, plants in Chippewa Falls usually use about 2 million gallons a day for water, but most of that's recycled, so they use about 18,000 gallons a day for making water.
Okay. So there you go. Thanks.
Standard irrigation pivot for corn, 24 hours is like 1.4 million gallons of water used, so not a whole lot of water in broad scheme of things.
Yeah, well, that may be. That's not my expertise, so I can't really. Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Yes.
Why is the geological survey maps from the 1980s now obsolete? Unlike wildlife, rocks don't move around. So, what's changed, or what was wrong with those maps?
Well, in Waupaca County, there have been 6,309 wells drilled with lots of information. And when those maps were made in 1982, they were using older well data because we don't have many outcrops here in the central Wisconsin. We don't have many outcrops of bedrock. And so bedrock maps have always been made using whatever well data were available. And well data was, you know, really sparse in 1982 compared to what it is now. So the thing is, they could go back, and they'd love to do this, I know, but they just don't have the budget and the person power to do it. But right now, but you know, if the reason that it needs to be done and the reason that stuff is obsolete is because there's this huge amount of data that's there that has never been looked at, and you know, for that purpose. I'm sort of doing it here for Waupaca County. If I kept this up, you'd have to discuss this with my wife. But anyway, if I kept this up, I could eventually probably come up with a new bedrock map for Waupaca County. Kind of an interesting thought, actually. And certainly very useful. I mean, it isn't just this business, this sand mine business, that makes it interesting. It could be used for lots of things, you know, like telling you where to look for clay deposits or where to look for, you know, any number of things. Well, yes?
If you go further south, you know, where California...
South of Waupaca County?
Yeah. Is
Okay.
there more of the sand that they're...
Yes. Yes. This trend, you know, that you saw on my map of things increasing east and south, that continues into the other counties. But there's a caveat to that, and that is that as you go further south or east, it's true, you know, the sandstone is there. It's no longer, you don't have to worry about it being eroded. But as you move in those directions, it's getting covered by more and more other sediments like limestones and clays and all kinds of other things that you would have to remove to get to it. So, you know, it's a game of, you know, optimization. At some point, I'd rather have spottier occurrences, but easily accessible, rather than nice continuous bodies of sandstone, but they're 400 feet deep or whatever, and I got to remove all that rock to get there, and it doesn't pay. So that's the argument. Yes?
Does the term drift-free mean anything to your research? Drift-free zone?
Yeah. Well, in Wisconsin, that means a lot. You mean the driftless area.
Okay, yeah, right.
Yeah, the driftless area doesn't come into this. We're not in the driftless area here in Waupaca County. That's to the southwest.
Okay.
Yeah. Did you have another question or comment? Okay, well, I don't want to hold people here that don't want to be here, so you're free to leave. and if you want to come up here, thank you. If you want to come up and ask questions, or if you want to see how to use the database, or what else can I do? I was going to bring a great big piece of Jordan sandstone, but I decided to leave it home. I figured people would be so bored after all this, but maybe some other time. Anybody wants to talk about anything, it's fine. I'll be here for a while yet. We have to leave by 8 o'clock, though. We have to be out of here by 8 o'clock, and we have to get shut down. So, no, thank you. Thank you.